Near-death experiences. The existence of this phenomenon can only be denied by someone who fanatically believes that science has already studied everything, that there are no mysteries left in the world, and that all components of our reality are already known. But this is nothing more than a naive illusion. In fact, we know almost nothing about the world we live in. The current level of progress is essentially a set of trial and error developed applied technologies, based on groundwork that began back in the 19th century. We still do not truly understand such fundamental things as electricity, electromagnetism, and gravity. If we have somehow managed to partially grasp the first two, then with gravity we have completely failed. The problem is that it cannot be quantized, which means that today we are left with two inadequate physical theories that contradict each other. Einstein's theory of relativity is just a theory. It is not something that literally exists in reality, but rather a naive approximation, a draft. Einstein himself thought so, yet in modern science it has been elevated almost to a divine status, practically worshipped by the school of relativists. Just think about it. Mass curves space, and because space is curved, gravity arises. It's like the well-known German tale where Baron Munchausen got stuck in a swamp and pulled himself out by his own hair, along with his horse. Other well-known theories are in a similar position, string theory, which has not been confirmed. Why then were enormous colliders and particle detectors built? Following that comes the Standard Model together with the Big Bang theory, based on the latest data from the James Webb Telescope and calculations of the acceleration vector using Doppler measurements from 1.3 million quasars. Scientists were able to create a dipole map. It shows a different direction and acceleration than the temperature dipole obtained in the early 1990s by the COPE satellite. This simply cannot be the case physically, and effectively undermines the Big Bang theory. All of this suggests that we are fundamentally mistaken in our understanding of the universe. It seems to be structured in a way that is radically different from what we once imagined.
Doc, can we trace the development of scientific thought? Why did we end up in this situation?
In short, without diving into the full history of scientific thought, or turning this into a 5-hour lecture, we can say that this turning point happened in the second half of the 19th century, when humanity tried to explain the universe without the involvement of any supernatural forces, purely on a material basis. Here we are dealing with a fundamental philosophical question. What is the foundation of reality, matter, or consciousness?
By the way, yes, our memory works on a purely material substrate. When neural connections form in the brain, that's when we remember things. But when it comes to the hundreds of thousands, or maybe even millions, of reported near-death experiences, how is it that people remember something every time and then later recount it? Where does that memory come from in the brain? After all, the heart wasn't beating. There was no oxygen and no electrical activity in the brain. The body was essentially a corpse. No neural connections could have formed there. Logical, right?
Yes, this starts to look like something mystical. And if we really think about it and keep going in this direction, it may turn out that near-death experiences are not limited to the 10 to 20% of people who survive clinical death, as we currently believe. It could be that everyone experiences them. I mean that everyone goes through it, but only 10 to 20% retain those experiences in conscious memory. As you said, what method of recording this information in the physical brain could have been used, and how could those neural connections have formed there? Do we know any mechanism for that? No. The first thing that comes to mind is a miracle. And what have we historically called a miracle? Any process that violates the laws of this world, like walking on water or bringing the dead back to life. Here we are dealing with a classic example of poltergeist-type phenomena. For instance, when people report receiving messages on their phones from deceased friends or relatives, or when reality seems to be altered, or when duplicate objects appear, there are hundreds of thousands of such reports, and in reality, possibly millions worldwide. People either don't report them, forget them, or simply don't attach importance to them.
I have hundreds of such cases in my database, but it would probably be better to cover that in a separate episode. I have some truly crazy cases that are almost impossible to believe, and yet they are real.
Let's get back to the topic. What I meant is this. The most obvious explanation here would be that neural connections in the brain are altered through a similar poltergeist-like mechanism. We need cases where people critically evaluate the world they enter, beyond the so-called light transition.
Yes, there are several very interesting cases. So, my heart stopped, my breathing stopped, and then a very strong, piercing sound started in my ears, a pressing sound. Some kind of whistle mixed with the sound of a plane taking off. Something else, very strong. It really plugged your ears, a humming, a buzzing, all together. And then there was a pop. I found myself in some kind of tube. A tube with a very high speed. I was heading somewhere upwards. At first I got scared. I was very surprised by such power, such speed, I mean. It was like the speed of light. I don't know, but it was definitely a strong speed, and I flew for quite a long time. So gradually I got used to this speed. I flew and flew, observing what was around. I even relaxed a little, started looking around. Home. Where am I flying? So that thought process started. I remember it was just like a starry sky, the kind we see above us at night. It was like a starry sky, but the difference was that the passing lights naturally had the shape of comets. Yes, because of the very high speed. But again, the color of these lights was yellow. The stars we see in the night sky, they're not really that color anyway. Here it was a pleasant, soft yellow color, and because of the speed, as I said, they kind of smeared. And I immediately realized it seemed to me like some lines. Then, when I looked closer, I realized they were like little light bulbs. But to say for sure, whether I was flying in a tube or just flying at high speed in some kind of space. It is unclear that it was a dark space, I am sure. And then finally, I apparently arrived, and I don't remember was the pop at the end of this flight or at the beginning. Right now I can't say for sure, but that it happened is 100% certain. And then, it was as if I was pushed out of this tube. That is how I understood that some kind of process was taking place. And I didn't yet know what it was. Yes, but I understood that this was for the better. This color began to radiate a very powerful energy. It was an energy of some unimaginable, infinite love. It is hard for me to convey these feelings because we don't have such energies here. It was a very strong energy of love, which instantly calmed me. I felt so calm in these energies, and I didn't care what would happen to me anymore because the effect was so instant, a very good energy. And a voice began to speak to me. I don't remember seeing who was speaking to me. It wasn't some person or anything else, but I immediately recognized it because I was absolutely sure that somewhere I had this memory, that this wasn't the first time. That is, I know who it is, and I had the feeling that it was someone very close, the closest. I had the feeling that it was me myself, loving myself, the way a parent loves their children. Something like that, I don't know how to explain. It is very difficult. And it felt like instantly all the information, as if all the information came to me and I essentially had no questions left at all about who was speaking to me. For some reason, I was left with something like, well, the word absolute or something. Maybe I thought of that later when I started looking into it later. Many people call it the absolute or something else, but it seems to me I already knew that is what it was called back then. Well, anyway, it doesn't matter. In short, he started talking to me, and I began to change very much during this conversation, because it was the radiation of these energies, yes, through which you feel differently, and accordingly, your train of thought also changes. Yes, I realized that I was protected, that no one had abandoned me, that they had come for me. I remember asking a question. Since it was telepathic, I'll of course translate it clumsily, let's say, into our human language, because it is different, cosmic, And I remember our conversation consisted of me asking, "Well, what now? Is it over? Am I leaving?" He says, "Wait. It is too early to draw such conclusions. We haven't decided anything with you yet." I say, "Well, wait, tell me I'm done. I died." "Well, yes, but also no, not really." Something like that. And I remember we talked like very close people who love each other. I mean, really, really strongly. And that was it. And then I remember he said to me, "Well, let's go home." I say, "Home? Where to?" "Where my home is. You'll see now. You'll remember everything." And so we ended up in that space. But there I was already met by that group. Possibly our subsequent conversation, which continued. Maybe I just don't remember it. Maybe we talked for a long time. Maybe it was quick. And I had the feeling that this color, this voice that had spoken to me, it didn't go away during the whole time I was there, while I was communicating with my group. I had the feeling that everything was permeated with this light. Although it wasn't visually visible, its energy, it was present everywhere. The energy of love, the energy of warmth, that kind of care like a parent's real. I asked this question, well, why is such a world needed where there is so much pain, where there is so much bad? And I remember their answer was, you see, there is no good and there is no bad. Yes, everything is dual, but for you, there should be no good or bad. Or it might have been formulated differently. I remember this very well. Understand, there is nothing good or bad. There is only energy. And in general, everything is energy. Absolutely everything. I say, matter. Matter as such, as you perceive it when you are in a human avatar, matter as such does not exist. It is all energy. It is all vibration. Absolutely everything. And I ask, what does that mean? This is all not real. Real and unreal simultaneously. I say, how can that be? Either it is real or it is not real. He says, no, you don't understand yet. While you are in the old energies, the human ones, you will understand a little later and stop asking us these questions. I didn't even ask some questions because I understood them anyway. Back then, I understood it very well, because there it was figurative, happening telepathically, and you didn't need to choose words. You understood everything instantly. So they say real and unreal at the same time. And what they meant is that there is only energy. And they even showed me this visually, but of course, I can't explain it. They showed what matter consists of. It is like energies from which, let's say, architects weave this matter. This group I was talking about, they compose everything we see from this energy, but it has a different structure, not like we imagine chemical elements and so on. It is all a little different. I say, okay, so what is real? He says, real are your emotions. Real are the emotions. I say, what is the most important thing? And there was an answer like that. The energy of love, that everything runs on the energy of love. Like everything works thanks to this energy. Doc, I decided to stop this case here, as it is quite ambiguous. What follows in the story is rather controversial, resembling confabulations or screen memories. It deserves separate consideration.
The moment they say that neither good nor evil exists, my logic becomes alert, because it's clear that something is being left unsaid, or there are contradictions we don't yet understand. Let's move on to the next cases.
So I remember a long time ago, and I say a long time ago, this feels like millions of years ago, but it also feels like right now, like it's happening now, coming across a being who had been physical. This is before I had had any physical experiences. And feeling from this being what he is, what he was, this incredible power and joy and freedom that was a part of the essence of this being. You know, because in those higher systems, we know our connectedness with each other and with the environment. Our connectedness is just known and felt. So I could feel from this being this incredible power and depth and joy, and I asked him, telepathically, how? My goodness, what did you do? How could you possibly be this? How could you have arrived at this state of being? And he shared with me many things. But chief among them was that he had lived a physical life, and in this certain physical life, he had experienced a chronic health condition, a pain that lingered and lasted with him for a long time, some years. And the quality with which he chose to meet that pain allowed a certain refinement of his being, this profound expansion and this depth of knowing. And I could feel the incredible power and the joy that was within him, and that he knew. And I was like, I want to do that. I want to do that. I'm going to do that. I was just so inspired. And at first, he kind of brushed me off, almost in a playful way, like, yeah, you just don't understand how difficult this can be potentially. And I was persistent. I said, no, I want to do this. And he said, okay, well then go talk to your guides. So then the majority of my pre-birth memories are of a time immediately preceding this life, or somewhat immediately preceding this life, where I had taken a long break in between physical experiences. And I remember this guide coming to me over and over and asking me, are you ready to go back yet? Are you ready to go back yet? And putting him off for a while and then eventually saying, okay, I'm ready. Like he was just reminding me of my own intention and saying, okay, I'm ready now. And then reviewing with this guide what I can only describe as my state, like who I am and who I've been and what I was. And it was like reviewing a graph or something, and reviewing all these different virtues maybe, or qualities of being, or types of experience, vibrations. I could see what I had done and what I understood, what I knew, what I was, the qualities that I really knew. But I could see this one area that was like super obvious, like, oh man, I got to do something about that. Like it was not hard to detect. And it was this one very extremely low vibration fear that I had experienced in a previous life. And in that previous life, this fear had bested me, it had overcome me. And because of that, in that life, I had become quite an egoic monster, and I had caused a lot of damage for other people. And I could see the incredible depth of this fear, but I also knew, oh my goodness, the profound opportunity for expansion. If I could really meet this fear, experience it all the way, and deeply integrate it, I knew the profound expansion of being that would be possible, not only for me, but for the whole. So they brought me a lifetime that was very appropriate for that intention of meeting that fear. And that lifetime was not this lifetime. It was a lifetime just before this one. And I remember reviewing that life in detail, and then accepting that life. And then I remember accepting the veil. This is really hard to describe, but this is like in the forefront of this experience for me. This plummet in vibration down, 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 down from the state of connectedness and knowing and having full access to all that is, and knowing myself as all that is. I felt this plummet of vibration as I accepted the veil into this previous physical life. Down lower, 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 and having all my knowing be cut off and all my memory disappear. And all that I was felt like it was erased. And I arrived to this very dense, cold, empty place of being in the womb. And I was only there for a very short time, and then I was like, you know what, I am not doing this. There is no freaking way I am going to tolerate this low vibration. And I had all this fear rise up. I'm like, I can't even tolerate this for seconds, let alone a whole lifetime. I'm not doing that. So I summoned my might and I smoked the veil. I fought my way out past it, and I was successful in doing that. But I immediately recognized that I had killed the body. I had killed the fetus that was to be mine. And I had a life review, just like near-death experiencers describe. I could see within moments all the ripples in the branches, and how my fear had affected not only the poor mother, because I had heaped grief upon her, but hundreds of other people who would be negatively impacted by the mother because of my fear. And that was all because of my choice. So I spent some time then practicing surrendering to the veil in what I can only describe as a veil acceptance simulator. I know this sounds wild, but I remember being in this place that was like being dunked into a dark pool, and like being held underwater, and then you can cry uncle and they'll let you out, kind of thing, to practice surrendering to a veiled experience. And I can tell you that the real thing is a lot more difficult than the simulator, because you can't cry uncle for the real thing. So anyway, then they brought me this life, because I still had this intention to process this fear, and this life was good, but it wasn't as appropriate as the first one would have been. The first one was like a really good match. I don't want to put numbers on it, but just to give a crude sense, you know, like the first one, if it was like 99% optimal, this life was like 86 or 87% optimal, something like that. Not literally that, but I'm just saying I could feel like, oh, it'll work, it's good enough. And I remember reviewing what I can only describe as a vast flowchart of millions and millions of possibilities of what might happen in this life as Christian. It was like if you took a tree and laid it over on its side, and you started at the thick part and worked your way out to the branches. It was like feeling and seeing and knowing millions of potential outcomes, with some being very likely and some being much less likely. And there were events in it, but it was primarily about what it would be like to feel, to have the actual experience of being Christian, being the human. And I remember making certain requests. For instance, I asked to be intelligent in this life. I know that that's a quality that I had had in recent lives, and it was something I preferred. And they said, yes, you can do that. And I also knew that it was important that I knew my father and my mother and my grandparents would be important, but that my father in particular, that he would help instill a confidence in me, and that I would have that confidence as like a rock to stand on, so when the fear came up later in life, self-worth wouldn't be the thing I was struggling with. I would have that to stand on to face and process the fear. And I also remember asking, can I just not forget everything this time? Can I have like a tiny, just the smallest amount of memory? And they said, yes, you can do that, but it will make the journey more difficult. And I knew why. I could sense it was because the level of contrast between there and here would be even greater. Because if there's some awareness of that higher state of being, then being down here, vibrationally speaking, is such a stark difference. The veil is actually protective in that way. It protects us from homesickness and from missing the richness of that state of being. But I knew that even that contrast, though, was an opportunity for growth. Like all contrast is actually an opportunity for expansion and growth. So I accepted. And then I remember there having to be a moment to accept the life, and I don't remember that moment. But I do remember then being in a waiting area and all of a sudden this guide coming to me and getting my attention like, go now, like grabbing my shoulders very abruptly, like, okay, Earth time, buddy, that kind of thing, and being like, okay, now. And then being in this room that I can only describe as like a technician's chamber or a mechanic shop. It's hard to articulate, and there were these beings there that are very technical in nature. I might refer to them in English as tinkerers. It's probably a good word descriptor. And below me was this shaft, and the earth was below. And they do this thing where they like tweak the veil to you, because the soul, you as a soul, are very, very unique and rich and have all this particular, powerful, unique quality to you. And then the life and the body and the context, it all has its own vibration. And they do this thing where they make it all jive. They make this organic fit for the veil so that it will be effective in a lifetime. And I remember them asking me one last time, are you sure? It was like a last chance button. It was like getting on a roller coaster or something. Once you get in, you can't get out until the ride comes to a complete stop. And I remember saying, yeah, I'm ready. And then once again, feeling this plummet in vibration down, lower, lower. I like to describe it like if you have a sound amplifier that produces a pitch, and then you turn the knob down, and then once you get to the bottom, you just turn it down some more, and crank it down more, and then more, lower, more. That was what it felt like in the body of my awareness to descend vibrationally into this dense, dark, cold, empty place of being, bodily being in the womb, and having all of my knowing cut off and all of my connectedness disappear. And this time I just focused on not fighting it, because I remembered the previous attempt. So I basically just focused on surrendering to the veil and letting the veil do what it would do to me, and remaining in that state of focused surrender for a while. And then eventually feeling in this very low vibration state, sending one message back to the technicians. Did it take? And then them sending one message back. Yes, it took. And I actually felt really accomplished at that moment, because even just arriving to the physical is quite an accomplishment because it's such a vibrational distance. So then I was there for a while, and then after a while I was like, you know what, I am not doing this. There's no way. It was such low vibration, it was so dark, and once again my fear began to rise up, and I began to summon my might to find my way out again. And as that happened, the most holy moment in my life happened. I felt myself expand back out, and I felt all the stars and all the galaxies of the universe within me, and I felt the bliss of our sun, like our sun has a consciousness to it, and it was churning with this raging bliss of being. And God said to me, this is still what you are. You can never not be this. And that was like, oh my gosh. That was like, okay, I don't have to fight then. Because the fear was because I felt like I had lost everything that I am. And so this was like this deep reassurance. And I'm like, oh, okay, I haven't lost all that I am. Okay. So I stopped fighting and I just surrendered into the simple existence of being in the womb. And I was there for a while. It felt like a very long time. And then the next thing I remember is being born.
Now what I remember is waking up and opening my eyes in this very white, bright lit room. You know, maybe it was the hospital room. I don't know. I don't remember seeing anything except for just this bright white light and 6 beings standing with 3 on either side of me. Very tall, very bright white lit, glowing and shiny, and a lot of love in their face and in their energy. And they slid their hands under me and lifted me up out of my body. And as I came out, I remember standing in this room with them, and they were just radiating so much love and okayness. And it is like, you know, really connecting with family, but like real family that doesn't have baggage with it, like we're all used to. Just total acceptance, total love, total okayness, and they embraced me. And I remember standing with them, and they were showing me what I had come to do, and what I had done, and what would be possible from here on out. So they lifted me out of my body, and standing there and just being around these very tall and illuminated and loving presence of these beings that were very bright. And when I say bright, it is like they were this bright white light, but it feels very loving and uplifting and okayness about it, just in the way that their energy felt. Then we came to what I've learned now is the life review. I especially remember how my interactions with people I cared about had affected them, unbeknownst to me, and how things I had said to them and the energy I had put off to them had really hurt them. And the thing is that when you see a life review, you don't just see it visually, you feel it. You feel not just what you felt at that time, but how what you did made that other person feel. And I felt that pain in the heart. And then they showed me how my choosing to leave would affect other people. And they explained to me that we're all connected here, and that all of our energies are in like a big matrix connected together. And what one energy or one person does, says experiences, even thinks and feels, sends ripples through the matrix. And the best way that I've come to explain this is like looking out of an airplane at night, at a city where you see all the lights and each of us is a light. And if one light is to have a surge, a power surge and go out, then it creates a power surge through the whole grid that affects people, lots of people directly around them, and then even people all over the globe that it could affect. And that my light going out would create that ripple effect through the grid. Then it creates a power surge through the whole grid that affects people, lots of people directly around them. And then even people all over the globe that it could affect, and that my light going out would create that ripple effect through the grid. And they also showed me how my leaving would also affect my family. And so the next thing I remember is sitting in a circle of these beings, and there were now 12 of them, and they were all very tall, very light-filled beings, and they were debating whether I should go or stay. And the next thing I know, I'm starting to wake up.
This state, it is an instant, just some kind of infinity, sound all around, and that is it. In time, it is as it is. But at the same time, it is not there at once. As if you hear all sounds at once, all voices, all foreign languages, everything. And it is like a continuous silence, as if you are everywhere and nowhere. Everything and nothing. Such a thing doesn't give you up. There are no boundaries. You have this sense that you have the boundaries of some kind of body. There is this clear, 100% feeling of some kind of vibration. And it is very calm. You don't ask questions. You understand everything. You understood. You calm down. I think this is that phrase that a person probably hears, settle down. And you immediately understand everything. I am in my place. You walk into infinity like that, and it doesn't scare you because you can feel something, that state, and you can be aware. That is, you understand everyone was there. The living, the dead, those who have passed, and those who are only getting ready to come into the material world. Everyone is in this place. This is probably some kind of state of heaven or hell, but somehow everything at once. And I had this one vision at first. I don't know when it was, at the beginning, or in the middle, or at the end. It just came smoothly, some kind of flower, huge, purple, like that. It had many, many petals. And then, an elderly man turns around, and he looks at me, just like that. And he looks at me. He doesn't say anything, and he just looks and looks. And with that look, you understand that he is saying, everything is fine, let's go. Everything will be fine. And there, this soul, it seeks a state. That is, you don't end up in some place that you need to find. You are in some kind of state. It is not even psycho-emotional. It is not even some kind of feelings. It is not a sensual nature. It is a state, straight up. A state of power. It is strong, that is both protection and strength. You understand how everything works. And birth, if it is all at once, simultaneously. You look in this state, you see many cycles. You're just born, died. It hurts. And immediately, it doesn't hurt. And there it is, a colossal consonance. If you take, say, the state of distance, joy, happiness, those are all notes. But here, one time, they played. It is indescribable. That is, from there is such a feeling that I took a sip of something that I can't explain myself. We are here on tour, we are here performing, we are here earning. If you realize this in this life, you will live much easier.
This is where we begin to get descriptions of that otherworldly realm, and those descriptions are not always what we would like to hear or how we would normally imagine it. Most people describe an emission of light and say they were moving toward it, being in some kind of void, from emptiness toward this light. A certain percentage of people say that sometimes this source of light, if it happened during the day or somewhere in space, since many report that they moved far away from the planet, saw the Earth from a distance, were in space. They saw this source of light located in the same place as the sun. There inside, they saw what seemed like cities where life was going on. At the same time, they experienced inexplicable emotions, as if they already knew this place and were returning home.
That's terrifying. You could go crazy from this. I'm experiencing an ontological shock right now. We have a huge number of reports that are impossible to fake, because you can't just make a random person come up with such a story and post it on social media. No one would do that. These are people who are genuinely shaken by what happened to them and want to share it with others. Many of them had never even thought about these topics before. They weren't interested in them at all. They don't know the typical NDE patterns. And yet, they write their stories on social media or even record videos for YouTube. And in these stories, the same patterns keep repeating. This cannot be faked. There is too much evidence. It's insane.
It's hard to believe. It's as if we are inside some kind of science fiction novel with a complex, non-trivial, tangled plot. And perhaps the plot is even more complicated than we can imagine. Our further investigation will show that. For example, why do people under psychedelics see fractals and feel like they are moving into them? Doesn't that resemble the tunnel and the light at the end, as if seen through some kind of stained glass filter of our physical brain? If consciousness is the foundation of the universe and is fundamental, then in reality we must exist within some kind of higher-order mathematical soup with many dimensions. And the way we perceive the world is just a simplified interpretation produced by the physical body, imposed by this fractal mathematical matrix. Those are the thoughts that come to my mind.
This is truly shocking. I still can't process it. Even the very thought of it pulls you out of reality and disorients you. Could it really be that this divine light, as they describe it, is the love from the Bible that Jesus spoke about?
Here we're stepping into a very controversial and slippery topic. Almost everyone describes this love. It's stronger than endorphins and morphine, stronger than any addiction, as people with addiction experience say. And we almost never experience anything like it here in this world. Simply put, they are in an extremely powerful state of euphoria there, and their critical thinking is clouded. That's how they come under the absolute control of this higher being and are ready to willingly serve it. It is, in fact, a perfect system.
That's a topic for other episodes. Subscribe and share your thoughts below. This is just the beginning. There's a lot more to come.